You are listening to Thick Thighs and Murder Vibes, a true crime podcast. Join us as we uncover untold pieces of the puzzle to give you all the dark and juicy details.
Each episode will take you down the rabbit hole as we dive deep into real-life murders, unsolved mysteries, and sinister crimes. This podcast does contain explicit content and graphic descriptions. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
Welcome back, accomplices. Thank you for sticking through my scratchy throat last week. But now, you get to be stuck with Tara's very congested voice this week.
Well, I couldn't let you have all the fun, but my apologies to our listeners. If you hear any wheezing, it's just me trying not to die.
We've gotten a lot of feedback and have been asked if or when we would cover the paranormal realm. So our episode this week does just that.
So the story that I'm going to be presenting this week actually is from one of our listeners, and they were just dying to hear about the events that brought us the famous film franchise, The Conjuring. Millions of people have seen the films in the Conjuring franchise, but only a few know the backstory for the chilling tales. The Arnold estate was the site for tragedy and sorrow for 8 generations of the Arnold family before a new family, the Purons, bought the home in 1970. It was the Purons' decade-long stay that launched the home into paranormal infamy and inspired the 2013 film, The Conjuring. The Puron family of Rhode Island claims to have been terrorized by an evil paranormal presence while living at Arnold Estate. Originally built in 1693, the home has a long, storied history of hauntings and terror, even up to present day. When the Purons moved into their new house at 1677 Round Top Road in Harrisville, Burrillville, Rhode Island in December of 1970, the most curious thing that happened to them didn't have anything to do with ghosts. Rather, it was a piece of advice given to them by the former residents of the home. They told the Purons, "For the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night." The move into the 10-bedroom house had been motivated by Roger and Carolyn Puron's desire to lead a quiet life in the country with their 5 daughters. Their new home sat on 200 acres of land, so it certainly seemed more than suited to the task. However, a quiet life was far from what they would have over the next few years. It wasn't long after receiving that faithful piece of advice that the Purons encountered their first paranormal entity. According to their testimonies, at first the spirits were friendly towards the family. The 5 sisters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cynthia, and April, were the main focus of the friendly apparitions. They would grow very fond of 2 of the spirits. One of the entities was claimed to be the benevolent ghost of Miss Arnold, who was reported to have tucked the girls in at night and would kiss them on the forehead. Both Andrea and Cynthia remember the ghost who tucked them in. They even remember the way she smelled. Cynthia said, quote, "When we first moved into the house, for the first 2 months, there was a woman that came and kissed me every night on the forehead, and I thought she was my mother." Andrea finished her sister's statement, saying, quote, "Mom smelled like ivory soap, and this spirit smelled like flowers and fruit." The other spirit was Johnny Arnold, a boy who was said to have hung himself in the attic of the secluded farmhouse in the mid-18th century. The girls were very fond of the boy spirit, and they lovingly gave him the nickname Manny. He was said to have played with their toys and watched the sisters as they played outside. The family especially welcomed what they called the sweeping ghost. This spirit's presence would only ever be heard from a distance and was that of a broom shuffling across the floor. Whenever the family would go to investigate, they would find a broom leaning against the wall with a neat pile of dirt next to it. As time went on, it became apparent that not all the spirits in the estate were friendly. In an interview, Cynthia said that there were a lot of small things happening that no one talked about until it was too late. She stated, quote, "Things would get moved around in different positions than how I had left them, or they would all be shoved up underneath the bed, and I would go to my sisters and ask them what they did with my toys, and they would say that they didn't do anything with them." So as you can imagine, it didn't take long for more malevolent forces to begin creeping into the Purons' little slice of heaven. The children claimed that they were attacked in the barn by an unseen entity And that one night, a series of voices began to speak to them about the bodies in their walls. Andrea claims that her sister Cynthia climbed into bed with her one night to tell her about the harrowing news a disembodied voice had delivered. She said, quote, "Annie, I keep hearing these voices. It's one voice, but it's a lot of voices, and they are all saying the same thing at once." Andrea asked Cynthia what the voices were saying, and Cynthia replied, "They say that there are 7 dead soldiers buried in the walls." The family also claimed to have encountered demonic forces at the farmhouse. These entities would pull on the girls' hair and limbs during the night. They would also bang on doors, and disembodied cries were also a regular occurrence. While the girls were dealing with something reaching out to them from beyond the grave, a different series of events began that foreshadowed the terror to come. The family claimed that at 5:15 in the morning, the smell of rotting flesh would waft through the house, tossing everyone out of bed one by one. Andrea claims that about this time, the girls were visited by a male ghost that tortured them so badly that she refuses to give any concrete details. She said, quote, "Let's just say that there was a very bad male spirit in the home with 5 little girls." While the entire Perron family had paranormal encounters throughout their life living in the house, Carolyn Perron, the matriarch of the family, seems to have been the most sensitive to the spirits inhabiting the home. In an interview with the Providence Journal, she claims that she knew something was wrong when a woman in gray appeared next to her bed, moaning, get out, I'll drive you out with death and gloom." The woman in the gray dress is believed to have been Bathsheba Thayer. So who is Bathsheba? Bathsheba Thayer was born in Rhode Island in 1812. In her early 30s, she married Judson Sherman and gave birth to at least one son named Herman. Bathsheba and Judson were believed to have had 3 other children, all dying at a very young age. From what I could gather from public records, Bathsheba and Judson lived out their days at the old Arnold estate, both dying in the 1880s. Their son Herman outlived them, dying in 1903. But during Bathsheba's lifetime, there was one incident that marked the family home as a place of darkness. It involved the death of an infant and an accusation of murder. It was said that the child's death was caused by an incision at the back of the head. The infant had been in the care of Bathsheba at the time, and her neighbors were quick to accuse her of being a witch. Sadly, such an accusation was all too common a fate for any woman that was in any way associated with tragedy and had attracted jealousy. After all, Bathsheba had a lot of reason to make her neighbors envious of her. She was beautiful and had a husband who provided well for her and their young son on a private estate. So from there, rumors spread like wildfire, and the community told stories that Bathsheba Sherman was a sadist who enjoyed torturing her staff. When Bathsheba died, it was said that her body turned to stone and that it was part of Satan's price for granting her beauty. The Perrons claimed that Bathsheba would disturb the children by moving their toys around and making their things disappear. The spirit of Bathsheba, however, had a particular hatred for Carolyn. It was said that Bathsheba was infatuated with Roger, Carolyn's husband, and as such wanted Carolyn out of the way. Andrea, the eldest daughter, later said, quote, "Whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of the house, and she resented the competition my mother posed for that position." Because Bathsheba's infatuation with Roger, he only ever encountered her sweeter side, with nothing but light-fingered caresses and sensual advances from the spirit. Man, I be fighting.
Ghost trying to steal my husband.
I could. There's a show that has Courtney Cox in it, and I forget what it's called, but I see the ad for it all the time, and I haven't watched it, but I always want to, because you just hear her say, "The ghost fucked my husband." And it just makes me laugh. I'm like, that's my kind of show. So anyways, the Perrons allege that Bathsheba's attack began as harmless poltergeist activity. They were pinched, poked, and prodded by a seemingly invisible force, but then things escalated. It was no secret that Bathsheba wanted the Perrons to leave, and the only way she knew how to do that was by torturing Carolyn. Carolyn reported being physically hurt and emotionally tormented. She would wake with unexplainable bruises on her body. Her energy felt constantly consumed. When physically assaulting Carolyn didn't work, the Perrons claimed that Bathsheba inhabited Carolyn's body to better horrify them. Possessing Carolyn gave the spirit the power to cause the mother and her family intense bodily harm, and it left Carolyn feeling weak and emotionally drained. Before too long, the whole Perron family was exhausted and desperately in need of help. Through a friend of the family, they were in contact with Ed and Lorraine Warren, who have worked on many paranormal cases, including the Amityville case. Lorraine, who is a clairvoyant, said she immediately sensed a dark spirit living in the house. She pointed to a small circular incision on the back of Carolyn's leg, identifying it as Bathsheba's handiwork. Lorraine stated that the wound possessed the same characteristics as the one found drilled into the infant's skull, and that Bathsheba had indeed been guilty of that horrific crime. The Warrens declared that the house was diabolically infested, with all its inhabitants in danger of falling under Bathsheba's power. However, they stated that an exorcism was not possible because the Perrons were not religious, but they did attempt a seance with Carolyn in the basement of the house. Sadly, it backfired, and the paranormal activity intensified thereafter. To this day, Lorraine is still traumatized by the old Arnold estate. In her own words, she says, quote, "The things that went on there were just so incredibly frightening, it still affects me to talk about it today." Andrea Perron corroborates Lorraine's story. She claims that she snuck into the basement to see the seance firsthand and was never able to look at her mother the same way again. She says, quote, "My mother began to speak a language not of this world and a voice not of her own. Her chair levitated and she was thrown across the room." For years after the Warrens visited, the Perrons continued to live alongside the dark entities of the house. According to Andrea, the Warrens did not help the haunting at all, but rather made it worse. If you remember, in The Conjuring, there's a series of escalating games of hide and clap where one person is blindfolded while the rest of the girls playing run off to hide. In these scenes, the mother is consistently taunted by a pair of ghostly clapping hands belonging to Bathsheba. It turns out that the real story is much more harrowing. Cynthia Perron claims that one day while the girls were playing hide and seek on the farm, she hid in a pine box without any kind of lock, latch, or ventilation. However, no one came to find her. Cynthia decided to find a new hiding place. However, when she tried to open the box, it wouldn't open. Cynthia began pushing on the box, and when it still wouldn't open, she became scared and started to panic. She states that she was kicking, pushing, and screaming, but nobody could hear her. Finally, after about 20 minutes, she gave up, and luckily her sister Nancy came along and simply opened the box for her. One of the biggest questions most people have about the haunting of the Perron family is, why didn't they just leave? The family lived in their rural Rhode Island farmhouse for 9 years, from 1971 to 1980. And throughout that time, they were set upon by ghosts, both good and evil. Unfortunately, it wasn't financially possible for the family to leave. The haunting was happening during the end of the Nixon administration, all the way through the Carter administration. So the economy was in the toilet at that time. And no matter how good your friends are, no one has room to house 5 teenage girls and 2 adults. Aside from that, the property value of their 200-acre farm was devaluing by the day. The family would have been destitute if they had just walked away from the house. Thankfully, in 1980, the Perron family was finally able to sell the house, and as soon as the paperwork was signed, they made a beeline for Georgia and never looked back. According to the family, they're still being haunted by Bathsheba. During the filming of The Conjuring, the entire family was invited to set. Initially, they were all going to go, but at last minute, Caroline got cold feet and she changed her mind. She claimed that she didn't want to make the trip, but there also had been some trepidation on her part to dig up the past. Andrea claims that while the family was being interviewed, a rogue wind swept over the family, knocking down cameras, lights, and anything that surrounded them. They all agreed it was Bathsheba's curse. It wasn't until they returned to their hotels that evening that they heard about their mother falling and breaking her hip at the exact same time that the wind swept over them. When the family made it to their mother's hospital room, they claimed that she sat up and said, "Bathsheba's curse. She does not want to be exposed." But was Bathsheba really a witch? Or was she just a victim of bad press? The film insists that Bathsheba sacrificed her baby to Satan before hanging herself in order to become a malevolent spirit within the Rhode Island farmhouse. However, it turns out that Bathsheba was just a normal woman who was married and had 4 children. 3 of them died at a young age, but this was the 19th century, and in 1885, Bathsheba passed away from a stroke and was buried next to her husband and 3 children. After the Perrone family moved out, a woman by the name of Norma Sutcliffe moved in. After living in the house for many years, Norma states that she has never seen a ghost or spirit. It is, however, interesting that in 2005, the Sci-Fi Channel's Ghost Hunters were invited to investigate the house, and the team reported finding several cold spots and recorded a door opening on its own accord. All of this surprised Norma at the time. Whilst the history of the house may have been muddled, whether it be intentionally or not, across the deceased, it is still possible that the house is haunted. At the very least, the Perrone family continues to confirm that the haunting really did occur. It is also possible that the haunting was not directly connected to the house, but rather the family themselves. As spirits tend to prey on children, like in the case of Daniel Lutz in the Amityville haunting, Roger and Carolyn Perrone had 5 young daughters. Sadly, there is little evidence for the Perrone's family haunting beyond their collective testimonies. If there were evil entities in that house, it is unlikely that one of them was actually Bathsheba Sherman. As records show, no evidence of any of the accusations levied against her. However, evil spirits or even demonic forces have never needed a name. If they exist, they would probably have no doubt as to how we identify and categorize them. Evil entities, much like evil people, would simply change names and faces to suit their aim of deception. Thus, much like the nameless serial killers who grow old and die quietly, the truth of what happened to the Perrones will always be exclusive. In 2019, paranormal investigators Jen and Corey Heinzen had bought the old Arnold estate and turned it into an official tourist attraction where visitors were welcome to explore the home via day tours, night investigations, and live streamed events. However, the couple soon became overwhelmed with the busyness of running a popular haunted house, so they decided to put it up for sale. Then, according to the Associated Press, in May of 2022, the Heinzens sold the property to Jacqueline Nunez, a Boston-based developer who strongly believes in the paranormal. Fortunately for fans, Nunez has continued the Heinzens' original mission of paranormal business at the home, still offering tours, investigations, and even private events there. But Nunez agrees with the Heinzens that she would not live at the house full-time because the energy is so powerful. That is my story for you this week. And let me tell you, some of the parts of it, were really hitting home for me because, as you know, I'm very intuitive and I always have been. And although most of my experiences have always been kind of mild or tame, there is one in particular that still gives me the chills. So for the purpose of this story, I'm going to kind of explain the layout of the house because it kind of comes in handy as far as some reference points. If you walk into our front door, you walk about 8 to 10 steps in front of you, there's a hallway to your right. All the way at the end of that hallway on the right-hand side was my bedroom. And then at the front of the hallway on the right-hand side was my sister's bedroom. And right across from my sister's bedroom was our bathroom. So I was 17. I was hanging out with my sister and we were probably messing with tarot cards or doing some other witchy shit because that's usually what we did when we hung out together. And I got up to go to the bathroom. So I'm in the bathroom doing my business, come out, and I just kind of stopped for a second and I happened to look down the hall towards my room. And when I did, I saw this black figure just come out of my bedroom and rush down the hall at me. And I kind of froze for a second. And then I ran into my sister's room. I told her what happened. I was so freaked out. I refused to sleep in my room that night. I ended up sleeping in my sister's room and I was terrified. and it still freaks me out. I have no idea what that black mass was, but I do know whatever it was evil, and it definitely wanted to hurt me.
Yikes. I've never heard that before, and I've been in your house many times, so that's cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Shayna, my house is haunted.
So I've never really had any experiences like that before. My story this week is on the lighter side as far as hauntings go. While I was doing research for this episode, I came across this hotel that grabbed my attention. The historic 1886 Crescent Hotel and Spa is a 78-room resort hotel perched on the top of West Mountain above the Victorian village of Eureka Springs, Arkansas. 27 acres at the north end of West Mountain was chosen for its majestic location overlooking the valley. It was an important time in Eureka Springs history as the healing waters of the Ozarks had become well known across the nation. People from near and far were swarming to the area in hopes of curing their ailments and easing their pains. The Crescent Hotel and Spa developers planned to take advantage of these many travelers by building the most luxurious resort in the country. Numerous stonemasons were brought in from Ireland to begin the construction in 1884. Construction continued for the next 2 years, and more workers were hired as electrical lights, modern plumbing, steam heating, an elevator, extensive landscaping, and luxurious decorations and amenities were built into the hotel. In the end, the hotel cost $294,000 to build, which I turned to good old Google, and it translates to $9,100,890 today.
Holy fuck buckets.
Yeah. So quite the hotel. The hotel opened on May 20th, 1886, offering large, airy rooms with exquisite furnishings, a dining room that once seated more than 500 people, and outside amenities that included a swimming pool, tennis courts, and croquet, among a beautiful landscape of flower gardens, winding boardwalks, and gazebos. Immediately, the well-to-do of the nation began to flock to the luxurious resort hotel. Once there, the guests could enjoy not only the healing waters of the spa, but also a stable full of 100 horses, tea dances in the afternoon, which I'm not quite sure what tea dances are, and elaborate parties every evening with a full in-house orchestra. However, the prosperity was not to last. After the turn of the century, people began to realize that the acclaimed healing waters didn't have the curative powers that the hotel and the city were known for.
I really like how you described that because I'm picturing it in my head.
Little by little, people stopped coming to the beautiful resort. From 1908 to 1924, the building was utilized as the Crescent College and Conservatory for young women, but continued as a resort during the summers. After operating for 16 years, the revenues from tuition and summer guests were not high enough to maintain the costs of running the large building, and the women's college closed. After sitting abandoned for the next 6 years, it briefly reopened as a junior college from 1930 to 1934. In 1937, Norman Baker arrived on the scene and bought the aging hotel to open a cancer hospital and health resort.
You can see where this is going.
Advertising miracle cures that required neither surgery nor painful extensive tests, the Baker Hospital alleged that its patients would walk away from the resort cancer-free. What was unknown to the many desperate patients who flocked to the hospital was that Norman Baker's miracle was nothing more than a scam that he had been pushing onto unsuspecting patients for years. The man had absolutely no medical training and had been convicted in Iowa in 1936, so just a year prior, for practicing medicine without a license. The American Medical Association had condemned the many elixirs sold for several different ailments, including cancer. While operating the hospital, Baker was being investigated by federal authorities and in 1939 was finally arrested for mail fraud. One U.S. postal inspector estimated that Baker had made as much as $500,000 per year selling his miracle elixirs through the mail while in Eureka Springs, which again, good old Google told me that amount is worth about $10,912,338 today.
Yeah, that's like Kardashian money.
Baker was convicted to serve a 4-year sentence in Leavenworth, Kansas. The investigation revealed that over the years, Baker had defrauded cancer patients out of approximately $4 million. While no one technically died from Baker's cure, the investigation showed that his treatments most likely hastened the death of those suffering from cancer when they didn't receive effective forms of treatments. In 1944, Baker was released from Leavenworth and moved to Florida, where he lived comfortably until he died in 1958. During the war years of 1940 to 1946, the beautiful building once again sat empty. However, in 1946, the hotel was purchased by 4 Chicago businessmen who began to restore the old hotel to its former elegance. Though never at the level of its first grand days in the late 1800s, the hotel again began to thrive. Unfortunately, tragedy struck in 1967 when a fire swept through the 4th floor of the south wing and much of it was destroyed. Over the next several years, the hotel passed through several hands as repairs and more restorations were made. In 1997, Marty and Elise Ronick purchased the historic inn for $1.3 million and began to rebuild, starting with the spas. That first year, a 6,500 square foot new moon spa opened, including Vichy showers, a hydrotherapy tub, sauna, massage and therapy tables, tanning beds, and exercise equipment. The next major project was to restore the hotel's skyline, destroyed in the 1967 fire. Costing well over $1 million, the 3,500 square foot penthouse, original center observation tower, and the 200-pound, 24-foot-tall crescent moon weather vane was restored. In the meantime, restorations of the guest rooms, lounges, electrical and plumbing, and landscaping were also going on. On September 6th, 2002, and $5 million in renovations, the Grand Hotel had been fully restored to its original stately glory. Marty unfortunately died in a car crash in 2009, but Elise remains the current owner. Of course, with the hotel having so much history, there have been some ghost stories told from guests and staff. The most often cited apparition is a red-haired Irish stonemason who the staff has dubbed Michael. Allegedly, Michael was one of the original masons who worked on the hotel's building in 1885. While working on the roof, he lost his balance, fell to the second floor area, and was killed. This area now houses room 218 and is said to be the most haunted guest room.
Okay, so we need to go to Arkansas and go to the Crescent Hotel and ask for room 218. Got it.
You can go to 218. I want the room with Theodora in it. We'll learn about her in a second. Michael is a mischievous spirit who likes to play tricks with the lights, doors, and television, and is often heard pounding loudly on the walls, which isn't bad. Others have witnessed hands coming out of the bathroom mirror and heard cries of what sounded like a man falling in the ceiling. Some other guests have been shaken during the night, and on one occasion, a guest ran screaming from the room, claiming to have seen blood splattered all over its walls, which would be a little disturbing. From the days when the old hotel served as Baker's cancer hospital, the lingering spirit of a nurse dressed all in white is often seen pushing a gurney on the 3rd floor. Only spotted after 11 p.m. when they used to move the deceased out of the cancer hospital, the ghostly spirit vanishes when she reaches the end of the hallway. Others who have not seen the apparition have reported the sounds of squeaks and rattles that sound like a gurney rolling down the hallway. The laundry area is also located on the 3rd floor, where a hotel maintenance man once witnessed all of the washers and dryers inexplicably turning on by themselves in the middle of the night. Which, I mean, the ghosts just have laundry to do. They all wear sheets, right? They're just doing their sheets. An apparition resembling Baker himself has also been seen in the old recreation room in the basement and at the foot of the first floor stairway, dressed in a purple shirt and white linen suit and looking somewhat confused. Probably wondering what the hell happened to his hospital.
Yeah.
Why is there a hotel here now? For a time, the antique switchboard continued to be utilized in the hotel, but when it continually received phone calls from the otherwise empty basement, it was discontinued. It was here in the basement that Baker's hapless patients were often convinced of these miracle cures and handed over their life savings for the treatment. Another remnant of the old hospital days is a ghostly figure who calls herself Theodora. Most often seen by housekeepers in room 419, Theodora courteously introduces herself as a cancer patient before quickly vanishing. Guests of room 419 have also said that they will come back to their room all tidied up after leaving for the day, which just sounds like housekeeping to me, but they have insisted that housekeeping hadn't come during that time. For example, some have said spare change that they had just kind of like strewn about on the dresser would be in neat stacks and sorted into dimes, nickels, etc. My kind of ghost.
Yeah.
She just likes it orderly.
Okay. So then I retract my previous statement. We need to go to Arkansas and stay at this hotel and ask for room 419.
Yes. I feel like me and Theodora would be best buds.
Probably. She must be a Virgo like us.
She must be. In the lobby, a gentleman dressed in formal Victorian clothing, complete with a top hat, has often been spotted at the bottom of the stairway and sitting at the bar. Described as distinguished looking with a mustache and beard, many have claimed to entice him into a conversation. However, he sits quietly and never responds before he suddenly disappears, which also sounds like my kind of guy. So,
yeah.
Quiet in his own little world.
Yeah.
I can get behind that. The hotel's crystal dining room is another place in the hotel that is said to contain frequent paranormal activities. Here, other Victorian-dressed apparitions have often been encountered. Many have seen groups of 1890s dancers in full dress attire whirling around the room in the wee hours of the morning. Other reports tell of a 19th century gentleman who has been sitting at a table near the windows. When approached, he says, "I saw the most beautiful woman here last night, and I am waiting for her to return." A former waitress reported that she spied the vision of a Victorian bride and groom in the dining room's huge mirror. The groom allegedly made eye contact with her before the couple faded away. The Victorian spirits that linger in the dining room are said to be very playful. On one occasion, during the Christmas season, the Christmas tree and all of its packages were found mysteriously moved to the other side of the room. Additionally, all the chairs had been moved to a circle to face the transported tree. On another occasion, staff arrived in the morning to find the dining room in perfect order except for all of the menus scattered about the room. They were upset with the special of the day. In the dining room's kitchen, the apparition of a 4-year-old boy named Brecky, who had actually died in the hotel due to complications from appendicitis, has been seen skipping around and bouncing a ball. And then also sometimes pots and pans are said to come flying off the hooks of their own accord. One other often reported spirit is a young female who once attended the Crescent College and Conservatory for Young Women. According to the tale, the young girl either jumped from or was pushed from a balcony to her death. Today, guests report hearing her screams as she falls. Other apparitions have been sighted in room 202 and room 424, as well as a ghostly waiter carrying a tray of butter in the hallways.
Just butter?
Just butter.
That could get slippery.
Also, Morris, the famed hotel cat, he was known as the hotel general manager for 21 years and later buried on the hotel property, is regularly seen and heard. A recurring phenomenon happens in a spot on the 3rd floor where the hotel connects to an annex built onto the hotel when it was a hospital. The area has been said to be a portal to the other side. Multiple guests have grown faint, with a few passing out briefly with no reasonable explanation. Guests suddenly turn pale, falling against and then sliding down the wall in a faint. Although the loss of consciousness does not last very long and complete recovery is immediate, It tends to further substantiate the hotel's legendary supernatural connection to the paranormal. Another little tidbit on the hotel is on February 5th, 2019, the Baker Hospital refuse dump had been discovered. The hotel's chief gardener was preparing land for a mulch site. She unexpectedly unearthed more than 500 bottles from a remote northeast corner of the acreage. The archaeological dig quickly showed that the site was simply not a dump of bottles over a ridge, but a carefully constructed pit dug by the hospital specifically to bury and hide all the bottles therein. The findings included serum-style bottles that seemed to contain the secret elixir that Baker would inject into his patients, which they figured out the formula for that elixir included brown corn silk, red clover, ground watermelon seeds, peppermint, glycerin, and carbolic acid.
What?
Cures cancer, I guess. They also found pharmacy-style mixing tools, such as a glass measuring spoon in perfect condition. Also, the blade of a bone saw that probably was used during autopsies and post-mortem experimental surgeries. Reels of Baker's 16mm promotional films, from which one frame was clearly legible with the words, "Before Baker Treatments." Well-preserved, what appears to be fleshy tissue still floating in the preservation liquid. These medical specimens appear to perhaps be tumors and other cancerous tissues that Baker would show prospective patients of what had been removed from others. Also found numerous other concoctions and or ingredients still sealed in apothecary jars. The best inventoried specimens are now on display in the hotel's morgue, the area of the hotel in the basement where it is said that Baker conducted autopsies and experimental post-mortem surgeries. In this area are his original autopsy table and the walk-in cooler where Baker kept cadavers and body parts. And then since this dump site discovery, a dark figure has also been seen in the morgue, and there has been an increase in cold spots and reports of people being touched. So that's pretty recent, because the dump was found 4 years ago.
And you can tour that, right?
Yeah,
That'd
they had
so much
tours. And it's they advertise it as America's Most Haunted Hotel. And I believe that's actually the website where most of this came from, was America's Most Haunted Hotel.
I think that would be a lot.
I think it would be too.
Yeah.
I'm totally down to like go on ghost tours and stuff. Like, as long as, you know, demons not going to attach to me and fucking haunt me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But, you know, if it's just touring ghost sightings and hotels and stuff, it'd be pretty cool. So that's my story this week, and we thought it would be fun to find some other stories for you about paranormal locations throughout the United States.
I am so glad that we both love haunted hotels, hospitals, houses, you name it. You and I probably want to tour it. So we should do that.
I agree.
So I've actually taken some ghost tours, and for my 30th birthday, I stayed at a haunted hotel here in Washington. Thornwood Castle in Lakewood, Washington, was built to the specifications of Mr. Chester Thorne and his wife, Anna. Chester, having been a successful financier and one of the founders of the Port of Tacoma, Mr. Thorne spared no expense when it came to the planning and construction of this unique country estate for his family. The creation of Thornwood was truly the labor of love. In 1907, Mr. Thorne purchased a 400-year-old Elizabethan manor in England and had parts of it dismantled and shipped piece by piece to be included in the main house.
Dang.
I know. I wish I had that kind of money.
Yeah, no kidding.
Renowned architect Kirkland Kelsey Cutter was in charge of this most interesting Tudor Gothic project. The castle has a very long history, and it is also the home of various specters which just refuse to leave. The original owner of the manor himself, Chester Thorne, has made several appearances over the years in the room he formerly occupied. Light bulbs have been known to turn on and off of their own accord. They have been found unscrewed. Guests and staff have reported seeing Anna, Chester Thorne's wife, sitting in the window seat of her room. She can be seen looking at the garden longingly. This room is now the bridal suite. One of the things which remains in the room is Anna's mirror, and it is said that sometimes her reflection can be seen behind you. The grandchild of one of the manor's former owners who died by drowning has been seen standing alone by the lake, and guests would rush down there only to find the little child gone. Thornwood has also been used as a location for several films, such as Stephen King's Rose Red, The Diary of Ellen Rimbauer, based on the book by Ridley Pearson, and is the prequel to Rose Red. More recently, the exterior shot of Thornwood Castle can be seen in the Oscar Award-winning film There Will Be Blood by Daniel Day-Lewis, and the castle is also featured in the Netflix series The Haunting of Bly Manor. I had always dreamed of going to Thornwood Castle ever since I saw Rose Red. I was about 11 when it aired on ABC, and as I stated before, I did just that when I turned 30. I did experience some things while I was there. I was able to tour the grounds, and they had a sunken garden there, and there was this cat in the garden, this black and white cat, super cute, followed me all around, but acted as like a tour guide for this garden because there were parts of the garden that I had no idea were even there, and I just started following this cat, and it showed me, so I thought that was really cool.
Showing me all the best hangouts.
I was also able to tour inside the castle, and though there was very little activity during the day, there was quite the commotion at night. So in my room, the lights would flicker on and off, and one of them even kind of like exploded, but didn't explode. Like it made like this popping sound.
Oh.
But then it still continued to work later on, which was really weird.
Weird.
At one point when I was there, I had gone up, there was this movie and game room, and I was sitting on the couch and I could hear footsteps coming up to that room, but nobody ever entered the room. And so I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden I feel this hand just grab my shoulder.
Ooh, got chills.
When I looked, there was nobody there, so I was still in the room by myself. Also, when I was touring the house, I was in the presidential suite, which was Mr. Thorne's room, and I was in the bathroom, and there was like floor to ceiling mirrors behind this giant bathtub, and so I was like looking at them and was like, oh, I wish I had this, bathroom. That would be so sweet. And I swear on my life that I saw the figure of a man walk behind me. And at first I thought it was the housekeeper, but when I went to leave the room, the housekeeper had already gone into a different room.
Oh.
So she was already out of there. And then the last night that I stayed in the castle, I woke up in the middle of the night because I kept feeling something caressing my arm. And when I opened my eyes, there was a woman standing at the side of my bed just staring at me.
Ooh, that is creepy.
Yeah.
I would not like that one. So a few other haunted places that we found are Waverly Hills Sanatorium. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium Body Chute in Louisville, Kentucky is one of the most haunted places in the United States. The structure served a lot of purposes throughout history, but the most significant one was when it was a sanatorium for tuberculosis patients from 1910 to 1961. Treatment for tuberculosis, an infectious bacterial disease affecting the lungs, wasn't successful at the time due to a lack of medical knowledge during that time. Patients were kept outside year-round for fresh air.
Don't they know that's how it spreads?
Due to a lack of medical knowledge. And many had their lungs surgically removed, which I don't understand that, because they then didn't have lungs and just obviously died from that. So what's the point? Many patients and nurses died while the sanatorium operated, leading many people to believe the structure is haunted. Even after all this time, there are still reports of paranormal events in the building, especially near the Waverly Hills Body Chute. Another location was the Danvers State Hospital, which is one of the most notorious institutions in Massachusetts history. That was a tongue twister for me for some reason. It is known as the birthplace of one of the most controversial and troubled procedures in medical history, the prefrontal lobotomy, Yes, that is the one where they jab your brain through your eye with a giant ice pick. The dark history behind this former insane asylum in Massachusetts will give you chills. Built on the same grounds where the Salem witch trials occurred, Danvers State Hospital possesses a rich history of paranormal lore. It was originally intended to treat the mentally ill with respect and compassion, but this facility quickly became overcrowded and conditions deteriorated. It is said that Arkham Asylum from Batman was based on this institution. In the late 1930s, the hospital was filled to capacity. Over 2,600 patients crowded the building that was only built to support 500. The staff was struggling to deal with the overflow of rowdy, sometimes violent patients. Some patients were left to wander the halls nude and covered in their own filth. Enter Walter Freeman. By 1942, Freeman had perfected the lobotomy and performed over 200 of the operations. His technique was surprisingly simple and shockingly brutal. By thrusting a long rod into the corner of the patient's eye and through to the brain, wiggling the rod around a bit, then simply withdrawing it, the brain's connections to the prefrontal lobe would be severed. The patient would be rendered passive, calm, and zombie-like.
In other words, brain dead.
Exactly. Danvers welcomed this solution to their problems. Because, that's what the mentally ill were problems. Yeah. Over the course of the 1940s and 50s, Danvers patients were subjected to shock therapy, psychosurgery, and a massive wave of lobotomies that set the stage for the procedure to be spread to other hospitals in the nation. The hospital closed in 1992, which is crazy to think because we were already born at that time.
Yeah.
And this hospital was still doing that.
Oh.
Since then, most of the original buildings have been demolished, although several remain. In 2007, mysterious fires began to break out in the apartment complexes that had been built on the Danvers site. People claim to have seen apparitions of former patients on the grounds of the old hospital, and the spot served as the setting for the 2001 horror film Session 9. Another location that we came across is St. Charles Hall at Carrol College in Helena, Montana. The oldest building on Carrol College campus is St. Charles Hall. It is also one of the most haunted places in Montana. The building is named for St. Charles Borromeo and was constructed back in 1909 when the cornerstone was laid by President William Taft. These days, the building primarily serves as a dormitory. Some of the paranormal activity that has been recorded at St. Charles Hall includes one famous incident that occurred in 1964 on the 4th floor. A student was in the men's bathroom when he blacked out and hit his head on the sink. This caused hemorrhaging in his brain, and although he was taken to the hospital, he died of pneumonia a couple weeks later. Ever since then, students have experienced strange things on the 4th floor. Many of them reported seeing a young man with a visible head injury in the mirror when they are brushing their teeth. Others have said that they turn on the faucet only for blood to come out instead of water. After several years of distressing reports like these from students, the bathroom was locked up and is no longer in use. However, there are still reports of scraping noises coming from behind the locked door, which is even creepier.
Yeah.
There are also reports of the apparition of a student jumping out of a window to commit suicide. It seems that the event is replayed like an echo in time. Others claim that a number of priests have died in various parts of the building and still wander the halls, but the only documented occurrence is related to the young man who died in the bathroom.
Okay, this is super weird. So my sister actually attended Carrol College.
Really?
Yeah. So when I was 12, it was her first year there, and we drove her over there as a family.
Mm-hmm.
And while my parents and sister were preoccupied with orientations and meet and greets and all that fun stuff, I was just wandering the campus. And for some reason, I kept finding myself back at this building. And at one point, when I looked up, I could have sworn I saw someone standing on the ledge outside of one of the windows. So that's super creepy.
Yeah.
It was about that time that this older guy had come up to me and he told me that that building was actually haunted. Okay. So he had noticed that I kept going to that building and I would walk up to the door, but I would never go in. And then I would just walk back. And so he told me yeah, that building's haunted. So that's like really creepy.
That is creepy.
When I look back up, there was nobody at that window.
It's probably that one that's reported that
Yeah.
he, like, jumped from his window.
Oh my god, that's so weird.
Oh shit. That's crazy.
That's crazy. So we have one more for you guys because we could not forget about Hotel Chelsea. The historic Hotel Chelsea stands proudly at 222 West 23rd Street in New York between 7th and 8th Avenues. It's a gorgeous, deep red brick building with an intriguing mixture of Victorian Gothic and Queen Anne styles. The hotel boasts intricate iron balconies and a grand staircase that guides guests to their haunted suites in the middle of the hotel. The Chelsea Hotel has been deemed a cauldron of creativity, a place every artist sets out for. The hotel roster includes Mark Twain, the Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin, composers such as Virgil Thomas and Lou Reed, and even Andy Warhol filmed at the Chelsea. That's just a peek at the famous visitors to the New York crown jewel. The hotel was a mecca for creative types. Perhaps this love caused some of its former guests to stay behind. Many folks ask why so many artists and radicals were drawn to the hotel. Was it the creativity that ran rampant in its walls, or did something else entirely draw them in? One of the most famous ghost stories at the Chelsea is that of a woman named Mary. She was a survivor of the Titanic disaster, losing her husband. She was depressed and distraught, understandably. Mary had ended up at the Chelsea and is said to have hung herself on the 5th floor. These days, Mary is encountered at the western end of the building. She's often seen under the archway in the hallway. It is said that Mary is always looking at herself in the mirror, which gives her the reputation as the vain ghost. Another ghost is Nadia. 10 years after Mary had hung herself, the Times reported a young woman who had jumped out of a window. She had grown up at the hotel, the spoiled daughter of a wealthy silk merchant whose family lived in a posh suite at the hotel. She was an artist, but her plans to pursue her vision were cut short when she met a handsome songwriter and ran away with him to get married. Nadia's husband eventually slipped into alcoholism and left her alone with her 2 young children. Nadia returned to the Chelsea and pleaded to her father to return. He said he could, but only under the condition that she take on the family chores and help bring in income. Life became too much to bear. She had no time for her art anymore, and eventually she had enough. Nadia can be seen roaming the halls and the sidewalk on 23rd Street, where she is said to have died. She's seen as a transparent apparition with a long, wispy gown. Another spirit is that of a man named Larry. He says that everything inside the Chelsea Hotel is real, but walk outside the hotel's doors and you enter into an illusion. Also, Larry tells us that there is indeed something underground at the hotel. Long before the Chelsea Hotel was built, there was some power that is the genesis of the Chelsea Hotel's creative power. Larry has an important message. How one conducts themselves at the Chelsea Hotel is important. Not just the art, but how one lives their life at the Chelsea Hotel. And we can't forget about the most famous haunting of the Chelsea Hotel. Former tenants and employees have long noted paranormal activity surrounding the ghost of Sid Vicious, accused of murdering his girlfriend while they lived there. Perhaps nothing has rattled the Chelsea's walls more than the fatal stabbing of 20-year-old Nancy Spungen at the hands of her boyfriend, Sex Pistols bassist Sid Vicious, in room 100 on the hotel's first floor.
Well, I mean, his last name is Vicious. So.
The 21-year-old Brit woke from a drug-induced slumber on the morning of October 12, 1978, to find Nancy dead in the bathroom. Sid was charged with murder, but died at a friend's Greenwich Village apartments a few months later while out on bail, having shot heroin and taken 4 Quaaludes.
That's always a good combination.
Though police said that Sid tearfully told them, "I killed her," when he was arrested, he couldn't remember doing it, and many who knew the couple didn't believe he was guilty. Whatever the truth, room 100 was demolished and incorporated into another unit to avoid having a pilgrimage spot for the morbidly curious, which is exactly how I would describe myself.
I can see that. So a listener has emailed us about a spooky story that they wanted to share with us. She said, "Greetings, Thick Thighs and Murder Vibes crew, and any disembodied attachments who like to hang out with the hosts. I started listening to your podcast, and I enjoy your stories. I, too, have a few spooky stories to share, so I thought I'd send you one. I only have time to write in one story right now, but I have plenty of others to share in the future. Okay, let's crack into it. I had to work full-time while I was in college, which meant that I had to go to classes at night. To save on expenses, I lived with my parents. One night, I came home from school after giving a presentation for one of my finals. It was springtime, when creepy crawly bugs like to infiltrate the house. Since it was getting warmer out, I was wearing a skirt. When I got home, my mom was in the living room. The lights were turned off, and the room was lit by the faint glow of the television. I sat on the couch and crossed my legs while I updated my mom on how my presentation went. While we were talking, I felt a faint tickle on my knee. It felt like the same tickle that people with long hair get when they shed a piece of hair and it gently touches their skin.
Oh, I hate that.
Yes, that is the worst fucking feeling ever. I always get it like the side of my shirt and it's like tickling the back of my arm and drives me freaking crazy because I can never find the damn hair. But anyways, I assumed it was a stray piece of hair, so I kept looking at my mom and smoothed my hand over my knee to brush the piece of hair away. The tickle continued. I looked at my knee, fully expecting to see a bug crawling on my skin. Instead, I saw a ghostly hand, just like Thing from the Addams Family, rubbing my knee. Although the room was somewhat dark, I could see this ghostly white hand as clear as day. The ghost hand was rubbing my leg as if it were my boyfriend. I was taken aback. Suddenly, the disembodied hand stopped rubbing my knee. The hand lifted itself off of my knee, floated backwards for a few seconds, then disappeared into thin air. I know I should be offended by the incident, but in a way it's flattering to know that a ghost went through the trouble of materializing its hand just so it could sexually harass me. Thanks for listening to my wild story. Cheers, Serena."
Well, big thanks to Serena for sending us her story, and we cannot wait to hear more.
We also have some listener birthdays this week. Annie K celebrated her birthday yesterday on the 18th.
And Wayne M. also has a birthday this week. It is today, in fact. We record on Fridays, so it's May 19th. So happy birthday, guys.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. If you have a birthday coming up, a story to share, or a case you want us to cover, send us a message on Facebook or email us at thickthighsmurdervibes@gmail.com.
Even though being sick is never fun, it has given us the idea for next week's episode. So stay tuned when we cover Munchausen's madness. Bye!